Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday Leading Change episode this week with Sadia Dibbens. Hey Sadia, welcome back.
Hi, Vasco.
So Sadia, on Wednesdays we dive into what might be potentially one of the most common aspects of the Scrum Master work, i.e. working with change. I mean, sometimes it's a personal change, sometimes it's a team change, sometimes it's an organizational change. We talked about a change already on Monday. For those of you who want to go back and listen, it's a great story about introducing change. And today we're going to dive deeper into that topic. And I want you to share with us a story of a change process you were working with. And for this episode, the Wednesday episode, we want to focus on the tools, the tricks, the tips, the techniques you learned during that change process that you still apply today. So tell us that story, Sadia.
Okay, so I would like to share with you something fairly recent. So 5 years ago, I joined the BACS team. You might recognize it. It's the online transfer of money. That's the system behind it. And how I think 90% of UK salaries are paid as well. Well, you won't recognize it, but people in the UK will. So 5 years ago, when I joined them, they were at this very start of their journey towards agility. There were lots of things, but I'll summarize the main items really that I worked on. So one of them was, it was one software engineering team, and they had multiple backlogs and multiple ways that work could come into that one team. So that made prioritization a nightmare because, you'd have, if you don't have one backlog, you can't prioritize work easily. Multiple ways, multiple streams that work would come in. There wasn't one funnel.
Yeah, so that would also mean that potentially different stakeholders wanted work done and they couldn't agree on the priorities, and that affected the team, right?
That's it. Yes. So I guess I would say it was whoever shouted the loudest that work would get done. Sometimes even if it wasn't the most important piece of work to be done at that time, basically, and that impacted other pieces of work that should have been done in that time. That was one thing that I worked on. The first thing I did was I worked with our wonderful stakeholders. I say wonderful because this was a big thing, a big change, and they were easily on board. Well, definitely, I would say easily because, if you have been working in a certain way for a very long time, and this is a long, long time, it's just, not easy to welcome something different. But they did. And I would also say my management was really good as well.
So how did you get started in that conversation? Because even if people were on board, I mean, before you start talking to them, you don't really know. So you had to prepare that conversation, right? So how did you get that conversation started?
Again, I would say my management was really good in helping with that. And the first thing, so when as I said earlier on Monday, when you join a new team, you take stock of where they are, and then you prioritize. Okay, this is 1, 2, 3. These are the things that I should really work on. So once that was done, that was my first step. And one of the things was this backlog problem. What I did was that, I just sat down and figured out who the stakeholders are. So, get a stakeholder map running, make sure, identify those key stakeholders who will be impacted by this change and who can help, who eventually helped me with that change as well. And basically talk to them. And before obviously talking to them, come up with, okay, so what will I say? So this is a big change. So explain the why. Why is it needed? That's the first thing, obviously. So in this case, in this particular scenario, the why was to be able to better prioritize work that comes into the software engineering team. And that obviously was a problem that a lot of stakeholders could identify with.
Especially because they have had They had problems prioritizing work they wanted done, right?
That's it, yes. And that was the key. Just, identify the problem they could identify. They could say, yes, I have had that problem, and if there's anything we can do to change that, and then you pitch in the idea. So identify the problem and then solve that problem. If there isn't a problem and you want to bring in a change, people will say, what? Why do you want to change something that already works? So I think the key in this scenario was to identify what the stakeholders could understand, that okay, yes, this is our problem, and in that way, they will be helping you to bring on the change. And they were extremely helpful, definitely. So we ended up with one backlog. We still have 5 years later, we have regular prioritization sessions where everyone and anyone who wants anything done from the software engineering team attends that session, instead of just going directly from here and there to people. That just doesn't happen. And that a key element of that was to coach the teams to say no. As you will know, it's difficult.
That's actually a very important part, right? Like, one of the things was getting the buy-in, which you explained, like talk to the stakeholders, talk to management, explain the why, and so on. But if the teams don't stop saying yes to everything, all of that work will fall by the wayside.
That's it, yes. And that's a bit of coaching, as in you're not saying no, you're just saying, we have a new process in place, and work funnels through. This way, if I say yes to you, I will be in trouble. So you're still not being impolite, because a lot of people, and I'm the same, worry about saying no to people. Everyone likes saying yes.
Especially people who are used to serving others. Like if you're a programmer or a tester, you're usually trying to help somebody else, and you get into this yes mode, which is right. But of course, if it goes too far, as you just explained with the prioritization problem, then we lose control of what actually gets done in the team.
That's it, yeah. So two things to sum up. One, in this particular problem, buy-in from the stakeholders and the team, and a bit of coaching for the team to learn to say no, um, and without being impolite. That makes sense.
Well, I would say a third thing which you mentioned, which is that together with the stakeholders and the team, you came up with a different approach to handle the incoming work, right? Like you had this extra prioritization session where everybody would come in. And that, I think, is a critical aspect of what you did, because it highlights how important it is to give a concrete alternative, right? Like, because nobody would buy in if the alternative would be, well, we don't know, right? You have to have some alternative there to say, okay, we're not going to allow any more work coming from these multiple places, but we now have a place where everybody comes together and discusses and prioritizes the work. So I think that's worth highlighting.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely agree with that. There are, few other things that I went through, but I think this was a really good example, I thought, to share with everyone. To sum up, just in terms of tools and techniques that I believe could be useful for other Scrum Masters or any change agents to use when going into either new team or existing team and bringing on change. It's nothing revolutionary. It's simple, but in my opinion, effective methods. I would say, when you taking stock of where you are, where the team is, and I would say it will be very important to do that with the team. So where they are in their opinion, because I think that's more important than what you think. And I would say continue with regular health checks. What I normally do is go through, not all the time, but most of the time, go through the agile principles and see where do the teams think they are based for each one of them, and then work on that, because I think that's more powerful than you coming in and saying, okay, I don't think you're doing that well, or I don't think you're doing that well. That would be one. Another one I would say is stakeholder management. I would strongly advise creating a stakeholder map. Nothing complicated, just if you Google it up, you can see how to create a stakeholder management map, and identify your key stakeholders, and identify who you want to work on first, basically prioritize that. And I would say every month, probably monthly basis, revisit that, make sure you're focusing on the right stakeholders for that point in time. Other than that, I would say communication, definitely. That's the key. As you try and bring on change, make sure you're constantly talking to your stakeholders and to your teams, explain the why if you're suggesting something. And as you said earlier, if you're proposing change, do be ready with what's the alternative. People are used to a certain thing, you're taking it away, be ready with an alternative.
Perfect. That's a great sum up. Thank you for that, Sadia. It was a great story.
Thank you, Oscar.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.